right, so before we go into the details about the actual comparables of your home, I want to talk about the market in general. This is always where I like to start so that you really understand what is happening in the current market on a big, broad scale, 30,000-foot view, so that you can understand where we've been to understand where we are now. So I've been creating this report. It's now the second quarter of 2026, and I've been creating this report for over 15 years now. And you will see many reports in the newspaper and online and things like that that talk about the Prescott Area Market Report. What is different in my data is that I go through it myself every 3 months and actually research the data through the Prescott MLS. I remove things that should not be part of the data, like for instance, to get the median sales price for the Prescott area or the Prescott Valley sales area. Our MLS includes data from New River. It might include data from Payson, and we actually by hand remove all the data that's not pertinent. We also remove all of the data about land leases because that's not real estate and we don't want those things to bring the values in our area down. So the broad strokes of the 2026 market report. This top section, I always joke with people that, if you are bored later and you need to fall asleep, feel free to read the whole thing and maybe you'll fall asleep unless you're a nerd like us and you really can get into these numbers. But what's very important to know is where we sit in inventory. So to start, so that I can really tell you where we've been so that we can talk about where we're going, I flipped to this page with a lot of nerdy information on it. And this morning, on my way here to this meeting, I checked to see what our active inventory in the MLS was, and it was 1,521 homes on the market. So this is really important. So this chart, although it has just lots of data on it, tells us some really important things. It goes by year, and we've removed a few years just so we could fit the whole chart onto the page now that we've been doing this report for so long. So 2026 is when I got into real estate sales 20 years ago now at this point. And little did I know when I got into it that in 2025 it was the biggest boom in real estate in the Prescott area that I'd ever seen, or that anyone has ever seen. And I wasn't in real estate yet, so I didn't even know it. What that data showed from 2025 was that year, a total sold volume of 3,906 homes sold. But at that time, and this is what's really important, there was 3,600 active listings on the market. A few short years later, and this is what everybody remembers, in 2008, is when the real estate crash happened. And again, just 3 short years later, we sold about half of the total inventory. So 2,000 homes sold versus the 4,000 that had sold 3 years before. And already the total listed inventory was down to 2,400. So then the following about 10 years was what we called the foreclosure years. So from 2009, maybe not quite 10 years, let's say to 2016 was the foreclosure years. And what you can see happen was we increased in the number of homes sold in that time frame. So it kept going up and up and up and up. And then what happens is the inventory, all of a sudden, as soon as that time frame was done, starts to really drop. And starting in 2018, when we sold 4,000 houses, which was about the same again of this 2005 real estate boom, we now had recovered from the crash and our inventory was a third. What that means is that things sold more quickly. We had a faster absorption of what was listed on the marketplace. And then we started to see sales go up. And then on another chart, I'll show you, we started to see prices go back up because supply and demand is an economic principle that no one can argue with. When there is less supply, the value of those things that are available goes up. So fast forward to today. Of course, 2020 is in here, and you can see that in 2020, there was only 625 total active listings on the market on average, and these numbers over here are the average numbers that we keep track of throughout the course of the year. In 2021, there was a day where we remember as a team looking at the MLS and seeing that there was 274 active listings available in the whole Quad Cities. That's Prescott, Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Dewey-Humboldt. This morning, there was 1,521 active listings. So Although the inventory is much corrected since the COVID years, it is still only about a third of what was available back in the last real estate boom, which is a huge part of why our prices are still so incredibly high. So there's some more nerdy numbers down here at the bottom that show a little bit more detail about when our season of selling is. So you can look into this more deeply and see that essentially we do the most sales in spring, summer, and fall, and then those sales fall off in our winter months of October, November, December, and really it's actually November, December, January are our three slowest months. So, why this is important is that your home has a value based on the price per square foot that I will show you later in the comps that we come up with. And those numbers have also changed pretty considerably over the years. So, the price per square foot numbers for stick built homes that sold in all areas this last quarter, there was 800 of them that sold, and the median price per square foot for the stick-built homes, so not manufactured homes, was $300 per square foot. In Prescott, that number is 326. In Prescott Valley, that number is 293. So we can extrapolate those numbers then when we look at the actual comps for your home and its neighborhood to determine if your home is above that median price or below that median price based on the neighborhood that it sits in. Of course, your home's value price per square foot is also going to change based on its amenities and its upgrades and its location. The rest of this report talks about some other important things that we always want to make sure that we share. And the big ones that everyone wants to know about are the average days on market. All areas in this second quarter sold in an average of 71 days, and they sold for only 1% below the list price. And that's just continued proof that the inventory is not strong enough to show that a price reduction is going to happen anytime soon. There's very little negotiation. If there was a larger negotiation in my career, there has been times where this has been as high as 4%. And when that negotiation is high, that's when you tend to start to see prices decline after there's much more negotiation that occurs. So in Prescott, that's only 66 days on market and then 99%. So you can only expect to get about 1% off the list price when you negotiate. Prescott Valley, 65, so even a faster marketplace. So that's the total number of days on the market before it closes escrow. And that's 1% as well. You can see that there's a tiny bit more negotiation in Chino Valley and Paulden, slightly more rural areas. That has changed. I think last quarter it was 99, so that's so nominal. And there things take a little bit longer because there's such a diverse styles of properties. Some are small houses, some are large houses with acreage, et cetera, et cetera. Another important part of this page to look at is the sales by finance type. That this last quarter, 364 of our total sales, which equals 33%, were cash deals. Cash has power in the marketplace because there's no appraisal. But you can see there's still a huge number of loans. 42% of those are conventional loans. So the majority of our market is still conventional loan products, which is why you have to price correctly, because 70% of the time you need to have an appraisal prove the value of your home, or else you won't be able to sell it to that particular buyer. There was a few more foreclosures this last quarter than we've seen in many years. The majority of these 11 sales were actually one builder that foreclosed on a whole portfolio in the middle of the construction timeframe. I believe it was 9 total houses. So these numbers are a little bit skewed for this month. So then the last piece that I always like to look at before we go into the comps for your specific home is on this first page. And it talks about the median home prices in Prescott and Prescott Valley. Your house is in Prescott, right? So the important part here to know is that in this quarter, the median price per square foot was $701. That is up from the first quarter where it was $685. And if you look down through the years, you can see the massive increase of that median home price in the area going up considerably after 2020, when the lowest price, median price that we ever had in the area was $250, which was $100,000 more than the time frame that I was recently discussing was the last real estate boom. So big differences. In Prescott Valley, just for your knowledge, we just hit $500,000 for the first time for the median price range in Prescott Valley. So once we understand where the market has been, it's a lot easier to look at the comps for the actual house that you own so that we can determine what its value is.